The message today is simple: win or go home. We break down a pivotal Game 6 on today's Locked on Wild.
You're Locked on Wild, your daily podcast on the Minnesota Wild. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome to another episode of Locked on Wild, your daily Minnesota Wild podcast. Part of the Locked on Podcast Network, your team every day. Thank you for making Locked on Wild your first listen each and every day. Make sure you subscribe on YouTube and your favorite podcast platform so you don't miss out on any of our new episodes. On today's episode of Locked on Wild, we gear up for a pivotal Game 6 with Joe O'Donnell, radio voice of the Minnesota Wild. We'll talk resiliency as well as the changes we may see in a game the Wild absolutely have to have. My name is Seth Topal, your daily Minnesota Wild insider, and as mentioned, we bring in the radio voice of the Minnesota Wild, Joe O'Donnell. Joe, thanks for joining me. We know the story. The Wild are down 3-2 in this series. Through these first 5 games, what have been some of the things that have stood out to you most about what we've seen back and forth?
Well, I think, Seth, first of all, thanks for having me on. If you're looking for some positives, it's been the 5-on-5 play for the Wild. I don't know that going into the series, I thought they would have an advantage there. Not that the Wild didn't defend well in the regular season 5-on-5. I think they were second fewest goals against 5-on-5 in the league, behind only Boston. But they didn't score a lot 5-on-5. And Dallas, on the other hand, was like a +30 in the regular season at even strength. So the one good thing is the Wild, I think, outscored the Stars 8-6 in the first 5 games of 5-on-5 play. The issue, of course, has been Dallas's power play has been outside of Game 3, where they were blanked on 2 tries, pretty much the storyline in the series. So the Wild have to get that cleaned up going into Game 6. You know, you're going to take penalties. Dean Evason even said that again today. Like, they're going to happen. They want to limit them, obviously, and then find a way to try and kill some of those off. A lot of it seems to have started with the Stars. I mean, twofold. The faceoffs, where they've won 70% of the draws while on the man advantage through the first 5 games. And then the other part of it is the rush entries. They've had a couple of goals off entries where they just seem to have attacked the Wild penalty kill with a lot of speed. Rope Hintz coming through center and then dishing that puck off. And then seconds later, it's in the back of the net. So a couple of things I've noticed there that the Wild certainly, I'm sure, are aware of as well. And they got to get cleaned up Friday night in St. Paul.
The big key is resiliency. This is a team that has faced adversity all season and has found a way to battle back. And Dean Evason said just as much, is that this team's going to have to really dig deep to keep this series going. What has the mood been like around the team after Game 5 in just trying to get prepared for one that they absolutely have to win?
Was at, part of practice today, and the availability afterwards seemed to be a pretty spirited practice. The guys giving Kaprizov a hard time after the skate. They celebrated his birthday the other day, so they had their little stretch at the end. He was in the middle, and there were a lot of stick taps there. And I think they're in good spirits, but I also thought they were in a really, really good spot going into Friday's game, Game 5. I'm losing track of my days now. But Game 5, I was a little uneasy after the Game 4 loss and not sure how the team was going to respond. And Ottinger appeared very locked in Game 4. Of course, then he pitches the shutout in Game 5. But I got a good vibe going into Game 5 from the team, from the players, from the coaches. And then they came out, and essentially 2 minutes into that game, it was just flipped upside down because of the Foligno major. And they really never had a chance to get a stranglehold on that hockey game. You had the Sam Steele breakaway like a minute in. Then Foligno goes to the box. He's lost for the balance of the game. And really, to me, the game was never the same. So I think the good thing for the Wild are a couple things. The extra day off can't hurt them. It might also help the Stars because I expect, Joe Pavelski to play for Dallas now in Game 6. So that'll be a big boost for them. But an extra day off can't hurt Minnesota. And the momentum, not only in this series, but really all playoffs and in the history of the NHL playoffs, there's not a lot of game-to-game momentum. So if the Wild can keep their minds clear and approach this thing the right way Friday night in St. Paul, I think you have to look at it as like a standalone game, right? Sure, Dallas has won the last two, but I don't think that gives him any edge going into this game.
Joe, let's talk about some of the particulars. Obviously, Kirill and Matt Boldy have been relatively quiet in this series, one goal between the two. But you look at all the stuff that we see them do that maybe doesn't get picked up on TV, just the things that they do kind of off the camera. You feel like there's going to be one of those breakout performances from one or both of those guys, and it's going to be tricky because Pete DeBoer has put a system together that has really limited the opportunities for both of them.
Yeah, Kaprizov now 4 career points in 12 career playoff games against Pete DeBoer coach teams. So take that for what it's worth. Seems like an eternity ago that he opened the scoring in the series, game 1 in Dallas, to that late power play goal and deflection. So I'll say this. I've been waiting since really game 4 for Kaprizov to have one of those nights, because I go back to last year and the series against St. Louis. Game 2 was a must-win after you got shut out in game 1 of the Blues at home, and Kaprizov has a hat trick. Game 5 back in St. Paul last year against St. Louis, they get down early, if I'm not mistaken, and Kaprizov literally has some of the most impactful shifts you could have, right? He beats Bennington with a laser of a shot. Like, I got through that first intermission last year against St. Louis in game 5, and I was like, they're not losing because this guy is just possessed. They ultimately lost the game in the series, so what do I know? But I've been waiting for those moments, Seth, right? Like, I'm waiting for Kaprizov to put this team on his back. You have to credit Dallas, I guess. I mean, right? Like, who else has shut him out in 4 consecutive games? Hasn't happened in his career. So we'll see. But I'm still hopeful that he can turn it on, especially at home. I think he just needs one. I mean, you look at looking back through the box score yesterday on the flight back from Dallas, and in game number 5, he missed the net 6 times. Now, not all those stats are going to be 100% accurate, but it's the NHL stats. He had 1 shot on goal and 6 missed nets. Not blocked, missed nets. That tells me something, that he's pressing, that he's squeezing, he's trying to be too razor fine with his shots. Just get it to the net, because we know this kid can shoot the puck with some of the best in the league. I really am just hopeful that Kaprizov in particular gets it going in game 6. And for Matt Boldy, he hit the crossbar late in game 4 that bounced to Gaudreau for the tap in to make it 3-2. Didn't have a ton of shots the other night in game 5. I feel like he's been able to attack with some speed and possess the puck in the offensive zone. He's drawn some power plays in the series for the Wild when he's had the puck in some dangerous areas. But for him as well, it's just got to be a shot mentality. If the Wild are going to go out Friday night at home and have their season come to an end, they better do it firing 35-plus shots at Jake Ottinger, and that's going to start with 97 and 12, picking up 5 or 6 shots each.
For a championship team, it's all about making sure every player is a perfect fit. It's the same when it comes to your vehicle. Every part needs to fit just right. So the next time you need parts and accessories, head to eBay Motors. With eBay Guaranteed Fit, you can be sure every part you need fits right the first time around. Just add your ride to My Garage and look for the green check to know the part will fit or your money back. Because just like in sports, confidence is the name of the game when you shop on eBay Motors. And with over 122 million parts to choose from, you'll be back in the game in no time. After all, it's easy to bring home a win when the right parts are guaranteed. Get the right parts, the right fit, the right prices on ebaymotors.com. Let's ride. eBay Guaranteed Fit only available to U.S. customers. Eligible items only. Exclusions apply. Joe, we have heard from Dean Evison that there could be some line changes coming for Game 6, and I think a lot of fans and a lot of those that watch this team are hoping for a little bit of a tweak. A guy that it seems like could step into a higher role has been Gustav Nyquist. It seems like he just makes a ton of winning plays every time he's out there. From your vantage point, do you think we see Nyquist slotted into a higher role to be able to just maybe give him a few more minutes in Game 6 to try to make something happen?
I think you got to explore it all. And Dean was again asked about it today. And he said they've talked about a lot of scenarios, whether it be leaving things really shuffling them up, one or two minor moves. Would an Oscar Sundqvist draw in? He's been a healthy scratch the last couple games. I don't know ultimately, Seth, which direction they're going to go, but you can't wait any longer. And if anything, the Wild should have learned from last year. They probably waited a bit too long in the St. Louis series to shuffle the deck. I was kind of surprised coming out for the third period the other night in Dallas in that crucial Game 5 that they didn't shake some things up just to get a look at it in a game situation because they were down 3-0 and didn't have a whole lot going. Now, when you lose Marcus Foligno 2 minutes into the game, or in Game 3 you lose Eriksson X seconds into the game, like that really just limits your ability to be flexible because you're down a forward. Gustav Nyquist has been outstanding, to your point. Have loved what he's brought to the table. He seems to be one of those playoff type guys. But I think the biggest thing for Minnesota right now is just the center ice position. Hartman's really playing on one leg. And Eriksson Ek hasn't given you anything but 19 seconds in the series, and he did his best to even get back for that. The center ice position is just crushing this team right now because of the faceoffs and the fact that I don't know how much juggling they can do when they're not that comfortable maybe putting guys in that spot, right? We've seen Boldy eat some minutes there. He's not a natural center. I know Nyquist has played some center in his career. I know Sundqvist has played some center in his career. But at this point, they're really wingers. And so I think it just makes it that much more difficult for the Wild when you're trying to put together this magic combination in a do-or-die game when you just don't have as many chips as you would have liked, or maybe you did even a couple of weeks ago.
Joe, there's been an interesting dynamic defensively because we know the Matt Dumba story. He may be playing in his final few games of his Wild career. And you have Brock Faber, who's playing in the first few games of his NHL career. And it's amazing the level we've seen Dumba raise his play to. It seems like he's been at the best maybe since the prime of his career over these last handful of games. And then Faber comes in and he just doesn't miss a beat. How impressive has it been on both ends of that coin to see Dumba step up and raise his play and for Faber to just slot into the lineup seamlessly and look like he belongs?
Yeah, I think you bring up two good points. One, it's crazy to think that this could be the end of Matt Dumba's run, right? But it's sort of been the writing on the wall really for more than a calendar year now. Unrestricted free agency coming. He deserves to get paid. But you're talking about a guy that has played 598 regular season games with Minnesota, plus another 50 in the playoffs or whatever. It's the only team he's known. He's a former draft pick, a former first rounder from 2012. He's given everything to this organization, in the community, on the ice, been a great leader, a lot of times a heartbeat for this team, and a lot of times a whipping boy from the fans and the media, deservedly so or not. He's had a heck of a run here. I'm sure it's weighing on him as he prepares for, again, what could be his final practice, his final game. Like, you got to kind of compartmentalize that, right? You got to kind of just take it and, okay, it is what it is, but I got to put this aside because I got a big hockey game to get ready for. And I'm sure Matt Dumba will do that, but I expect him to lay it all on the line these next few games because it could be the end for him. On the flip side, you mentioned Brock Faber. Boy, he had just a couple of games to show himself, and he showed himself well enough that they gave him a chance in the Stanley Cup playoffs, and he hasn't looked out of place. So I think that's really good for Minnesota moving forward, as you know you have a right shot D, which are hard to find, to essentially, I don't want to say replace Dumba, but slot in there somewhere in your top six, right? You're losing a right shot D in Dumba. You got another one waiting in the wings in Faber, and I'm sure he'll have his growing pains next year when he has a full season in the NHL, but he's shown he can play at this level. And that's got to be great for Bill Guerin and the staff to know, all right, that's one less massive hole to fill or piece to fix on the blue line moving forward.
We get the late start in Game 6, which is going to help the crowd at least. The crowd was just it was as electric as I'm sure you can attest to, as electric as you'll see in an environment at the XL Energy Center. And the team really fed off of that in Game 3. And so having that again in Game 6 is going to be huge because, it could be the final game of the year. They're in a point where you lose one more time and the season's over. And so not only will the team be putting it out there in full, good opportunity for the fans to just give it everything they've got to.
Yeah, Game 3 that place was on fire. And it's one of those where, like, during the game, you probably don't notice it as much. I got the headset on. Like, there's times where, like, even at the Winter Classic last year, I remember just wanting to kind of to just embrace the atmosphere. And the same thing with Game 3 the other night. Like, just wish there was a moment where I could step back and kind of be one of the fans in there to hear just how loud it is. They were into every single sequence and moment of that game. And Game 4 didn't feel so much like that. And I don't know if it's because it was scoreless late in the second, or when Sagan, got that bounce for the Stars, it goes in. It's another power play goal against, and the crowd. Well, I knew as soon as the fans stopped booing Suter every single time he got within 5 feet of the puck, that the crowd had kind of lost its luster. There was like a nervous energy. Can't have that in Game 6. If you're watching this, if you're listening to this podcast, and you're going to the game, the players and coaches will tell you the same thing. The more positive and upbeat and just jacked up you can be, the more it will feed into that group on the bench. Something Dean Evison talked about, even going back to last year from warm-ups. They would have this like vibe in the arena, and it just translated throughout the game. They had such a great year, both last year and this year at home. And I think the crowd's a big reason why. So I'd encourage everybody to be as rowdy as possible. If it doesn't go well for the Wild early, just try and hang in there, because they will certainly feel that vibe and that energy and hopefully put it to good use.
Final one for you today, Joe. Looking at the goalie situation, Filip Gustavsson he's given the team good enough goalie play to win in this series. It just hasn't turned out that way in a couple of the games. Do you think we see him again in Game 6? Do you think they go Fleury to try to throw a changeup out there against Dallas? What's your gut say as to which way this team leans between the pipes?
I think given everything we have seen this year, and I don't think Dean was asked about it today, which is odd because the media usually asks him every day. What we've seen this year, again, I said this going into Game 2, I was not stunned nor shocked to see Marc-Andre Fleury start Game 2, just because of the way the Wild had operated and everything they said and did over about a 6-week span leading into the playoffs. I think, though, that Filip Gustavsson is going to get the nod. He has been good enough, to your point. But there was something off about him in Game 4, Seth. And I meant to talk to Freddie Shabbat, the Wild goaltending coach, about it, and haven't gotten a chance to yet. He just didn't seem to be tracking pucks very well in Game 4. Like, you think about those 2 goalposts who were hit in the first few minutes. They weren't high danger chances. They weren't ripped wrist shots. They were kind of floating pucks, and he never seemed to move with them very well. There are a couple chances in Game 4. I remember going over his head and catching the glass, and he hardly flinched. And I feel like when Filip Gustavsson's on his game, he's reading the play so well, and he's so calm back there. Not that he wasn't calm in Games 4 and 5, but he just didn't seem to be, I don't know, seeing the puck as well. And I don't know what to attest that to. That's my untrained eye from up top. I could be totally off here. But I'd like to see him get back early in Game 6 if he does get the start, to be in that Filip Gustavsson we've seen, get into the game early, get into a rhythm. If he's moving well, reading the plays, tracking shots, I think the Wild have a really good chance to force this Game 7 back in Dallas, which would be on Sunday. And wouldn't that be a lot of fun?
That would certainly be just an amazing time. Well, Joe, thank you so much for the time here today. Wild fans, make sure you tune in. I'll do the Kevin Fallness, and I'll say #MuteTV. Make sure you're listening on KFan to the game tonight, or attending, or watching on TV, whichever you choose. Just make sure you're cheering loud for the Wild here in this one tonight. And Joe, we'll have to have you on here in the off season, regardless of how this series turns out, again, to just chat about the year and look ahead to next year.
Awesome. Thanks for having me, Seth, and look forward to seeing you down the line.
Big thank you to Joe O'Donnell for joining the show today. We'll wrap up with some final thoughts on the lineup and what else to expect tonight here on Locked On Wild. Final segment of today's episode of Locked On Wild. Once again, thanks for making Locked On Wild your first listen each and every day. Again, for the everydayers, make sure you don't miss the Locked On Wild postcast tonight, live from the XL Energy Center, as we break down all the action for Game 6. So we have heard rumors, rumblings, that there is going to be potentially some tweaks or a line blend for tonight's game. Well, if it were me, here's how I'd approach it. So, top line, I say you keep Kirill Kaprizov and Ryan Hartman on the top pairing, and I would pull Gustav Nyquist up from the third line to the top line, because Gustav Nyquist has made some really good plays all series. He's a playmaker. He's got elusive handles. He has great vision on the ice. And you're still keeping Ryan Hartman, who has the ability to be the offensive center and is probably the best offensive center you have at this point. So I keep that intact, keep Kirill on the top line, and see what those guys are able to do to try to keep this series going. Now, as for the second line, that's the one that's going to look a little different. Matt Zuccarello, Matt Boldy as the center, and Marcus Johansson as the wing. And this is because, again, you get another line that has more of an offensive orientation to it. And we've seen Boldy play center throughout the course of this postseason. I just think Freddie Gaudreau is a better fit at this point to be on the defense predominant line on the third pairing. And really, those are the options you have beyond Sam Steele. Maybe at this point, I don't think you do, though. Maybe you pull one of the Black Aces in, but honestly, I think you just have Boldy take the center rotation for this game, and then give him Johansson, and then put Matt Zuccarello there. You got two playmakers again on opposite sides of your top guy on that line. So you have put two lines together that have guys that can feed the puck to Kirill Kaprizov. Kaprizov with the ability to set guys up. Give that a roll, see if it works. The best part is that if it doesn't, you can go to whatever you want during the game, because I would hope that the line combinations are fluid throughout the entirety of this game if things aren't working. Your third line, Oscar Sundqvist, Marcus Foligno, and Freddie Gaudreau. Gaudreau being the center. You got the two physical bodies of Sundqvist and Foligno on that third line pairing, and then fourth line is the same with Brandon Duhaime, Connor Dewar, and Ryan Reeves. You've got that physical presence in the bottom six, and you have two lines that have playmakers on either side of your go-to guy in that instance. And so that's what I would do. We'll see what happens, because it doesn't matter what your line combinations are, to be honest, going into this game, if you don't answer the call for a game six, if you don't step up and answer the call for a win or go home game, it's not going to matter who's out there on the ice. So the main thing for tonight's game is that the Wild need to understand the moment and rise to the occasion. Rise to the moment in this game. You don't have any opportunity beyond this game, if you lose, to think about leaving things out there on the ice. Or if I did this, we would have scored. If I did this, we would have scored. You got to throw everything you have out there on the ice in this game. And so I look for the Wild tonight to have that same level of urgency that they had in game three, that same level of intensity that they had in game three, because anything short of that is going to lead to a game being way harder than it needs to be, and an opportunity for Dallas to hop in and to potentially steal. So it has to be a full level of commitment to giving everything that you have out there on the ice for this game. And that is going to include, as the game goes on, if you see particular line combinations that are working, or players that definitely have it and players that definitely don't, you got to ride the guys that are showing that they've got the juice in the system to a win here in this one. You can't just hope that things will work out, or that you can build some momentum up to the next game, because, again, you might not have one. So you need to really have a pulse on what's going on throughout the game. Throw some things together. If you see that you're getting some good signs from Zuccarello in this game, that he really wants it, throw Boldy, Kaprizov, and Zuccarello out there for a shift to see if they can come up with a quick goal and can get you some momentum. That's the other part of tonight's game. Quick starts. We talked about it. The everydayers know. We talked about how every single team that has scored first in this series, every single time it's happened, that team has won. So it's not like it's some fluke statistic. It is the rule of law in this series and throughout a lot of the postseason, because these games are tight for the most part. There have been some exceptions, but these games are tight, they're tense, and so that early momentum is just a tough hill for the opponent to climb a lot of the time. And so you need to be ready to rock once the puck is dropped, and you need to have your best stuff from the drop. You've got to play like you have nothing beyond this game. That's the way you have to approach the entire thing. And then if you win, you got to do the same thing in Game 7 on Sunday. So you have two instances in which you have to pull everything in reserve, everything you have in the tank, and put it into simply winning and simply not taking no for an answer. And if the Wild do that, they've got a good shot, but anything short of that won't work. So we'll see how things play out. As mentioned, we'll have you covered after the game with another Locked On Wild postcast, so make sure you tune in for that as well. That'll do it for today's episode. So hope you enjoy Game 6 wherever you are tuning in. If you're there in person, make sure you are nice and loud and ready to rock. If you're listening on the radio, #mute TV, as Kevin Fallness says. If you're listening on the radio, make sure if you're in your car, make sure you get loud too. If you're watching on TV, everybody just get that energy going for this game so that we have an opportunity for a Game 7 on Sunday. We'll see how it plays out, and we, of course, have you covered every step of the way with new episodes every Monday through Friday as part of the Locked On Podcast Network.